Hey everyone, I hope all is well. There's just a few people joining, so just give it another minute or so. But yeah, hope everyone's well. Really thank everyone for taking the time during the busy period on the run up to Easter. My name is Tom Latimer. I'm the head of business development here at Socialsuite, and we're also joined by Gareth Boothby, who is the head of implementation here at Socialsuite as well. So yeah, really excited to bring this webinar on how you can use social impact measurement to attract funders, which will hopefully help organizations demystify the complexity around impact measurement and especially looking at it from a funder's lens. So really what we'd like to cover off today is providing a view of how the funding landscape is changing. And that's really to be more focused on outcomes-based evidence. Show you how you can try and simplify that process because it is a complex process. We'll also run through some real life dashboards so you can see how other organizations utilizing Socialsuite is able to report their impact and demonstrate that to various different stakeholders as well. So just a bit of housekeeping. On the right hand side, you notice a chat box. Ashley is leading the way and putting a few comments in there. So yeah, good to see you've joined again, Ashley. We'll also be putting up a couple of different polls down the right hand side as well, just to gauge where people are at on their impact journey. So I'm just going to pop the first poll up now. So if everyone sees on the right hand side, give me 2 seconds. Okay, so everybody should see now on the right hand side, just getting to gauge where people are at on their impact journey, whether you currently already measuring outcomes, whether you need to measure, you're aligning internally and just gaining that exec approval, whether you just don't have a clue where to start, or whether you actually, you're ready to go, but you just need a bit of assistance and guidance. So there's a few different answers coming in. Majority of people already measuring outcomes, which is great to see. Hopefully we can shed some light on best practice from an outcomes measurement perspective. And then we've got a few other answers sort of ready to get going, but need assistance. So hopefully we can sort of shed some light for you guys on this as well. So a bit of context from a Socialsuite perspective for those that are not aware of who we are. We're a technology provider headquartered based in Melbourne, Australia. We've helped in excess of 1,500 organizations sort of help demonstrate and measure their impact. And that could be from smaller organizations, grassroots that are really trying to scale and secure that funding, up until some of the larger ones like Habitat for Humanity, YMCA, where they're now starting to feel the pressures from government or the large philanthropic funders to be able to demonstrate this evidence as well. Of all those organizations that we've worked with, it's pretty common to understand where organizations are at on their impact journey. And generally, when they're measuring impact, it's more from the output perspective. So that could be number of people going through your programs or number of sessions that you've run. And historically for funders, that sort of has sufficed in terms of the evidence that needs to be provided. But as you're probably experiencing now from current funders, from grant applications, that you're now having to demonstrate outcomes. And that can be quite complex because it's collecting data from individuals over time, in line with your outcomes you want to measure, in line with the programs, and then being able to bring all that together. So some common themes that we hear from organizations when we first speak to them, that we really want to measure impact. We know we need to demonstrate our outcomes. It's too complex, it's too expensive, it's too far from reach, and very, very time consuming as well. So what I'd like to do is just really hand across to Gareth, and he'll start to shed some light on what the current landscape of the funding outcomes perspective is, and also some sort of hints and tips on how we can sort of assist with organizations along the journey. And then we'll step into some real life dashboards as well.
Wonderful. Thanks, Tom, and hello, everyone. So what I just really want to talk about is, why funders want outcomes data to begin with. And I think where it starts is around the current landscape. So typically funders are tending to receive a lot more funding applications than they can actually support. But they also want to know ahead of time how you're going to demonstrate the impact of your planned project or activity. So you're going for a grant, you're doing a grant application. What is it that you're going to be proving or demonstrating as part of that project or activity that is going to give them the confidence that you're doing what you're saying you're doing, basically. So typically you'd already be asked to be doing this. You might be including information about your activities, but probably most of the time what you're being asked for at the moment is probably more output based. So how many people came along, how many people have you supported, all of that kind of output based information. However, by demonstrating a commitment to measure your project outcomes with outputs, you're probably more likely to gain that funding. So we're seeing a lot of not-for-profits that have typically, had year-on-year funding that are starting to lose that funding or fail to gain further funding because they're doing that status quo. They're failing to then, expand and prove that, we're having that change, we're having that impact that we're expecting on the beneficiaries of our programs and services, more so than we had this many people come along. And that's quite evident when we look at some of the Australian funders that are out there at the moment. So one of the big ones that funds some of our customers is Perpetual. And, you'll start seeing this in, grant applications or, the requirements for funding, being very specific about outcomes. So what are the expected outcomes of your proposed activity and how will you measure these? So ahead of time, you're having to think about, well, how am I going to measure that change? How will I demonstrate that in a clear and concise way to a funder? But then there's more that goes to it as well. So, how will I collect the data? How will I report on it? How will I manage that? So there's a whole, it's not just about creating a nice report. There's a change piece as well that's happening within organizations to be able to produce and, demonstrate their impact. So typically, when we're thinking about that landscape, more and more focus is turning towards outcomes-based funding over activity-focused grants. So, and in the past, I think funders have been quite reluctant to put pressure on not-for-profits. So whenever we talk to funders, it's always, we feel really bad, they're really time poor, they don't have much capacity. However, that's starting to shift, and it's shifting more to be around, well, there's technology to help with this. The tasks are less onerous, and they want that transparency. So how are those funds being used to make the change, and how effective are the programs and services that you're running? So big shift in, I guess, the perception from funders. It was, it's very onerous, but they're moving very much more to this is more expected. And I think it's a real shift around technology and the ease in which organizations can now do this. So next slide. The other thing that I often see is anecdotal evidence or anecdotal statements. So again, what funders have had in the past, and I think this goes back to some of the reasons why you get funding, right? So a lot of the time, a foundation, philanthropic organization will identify with your cause. So they'll go, yep, identify with that. Maybe something's happened in their life or their family's life, especially if it's a family foundation. And they'll go, yep, I like that cause. I'm going to put money behind it. The next one was around kind of that anecdotal. So a lot of non-for-profits would be going to funders and saying, hey, here's my story. Look, I've helped this person. Look at their statement on how I've improved their lives. But as the sector's maturing, that anecdotal is probably more satisfaction-based information, isn't quite cutting it anymore, and is no longer being considered evidence. It doesn't demonstrate that a group of people or a person has actually had a positive change in the area that your program is designed for. It's more likely that it's, I feel great as part of this. I really liked everyone. It was, run really well. It's more, I guess, superficial than more outcomes based. And we get to the kind of the next part. So as people move from that more anecdotal, the next thing that's being requested, and often by government organisations rather than private philanthropy, is output. So you might be required as part of your grant application to say, okay, well, here's how many people, how many staff hours, or how many of this. But I think this also reflects a bit of a misalignment in the space. Often the terminology of outputs and outcomes are interchanged, and often people are presenting output data as outcomes measurement. And I think, again, as the sector's maturing and funders are actually looking more at outcomes, we're also seeing a bit of misalignment. So customers are doing kind of that output piece, providing that to funders, and funders are going, hang on a minute, this isn't what we asked for. So there's a real shift at the moment to be more outcomes focused over those traditional outputs that were being requested, or that are more, I guess they're easier to collect, right? Because it's more of the delivery, service delivery numbers. So I guess a bit of a recap, it's not just about funding, right? So the whole reason why, or the whole reason we like to think that people are doing outcomes measurement is to be able to demonstrate the good that you're doing, basically. So how have you significantly changed someone's life for the better? Or in a lot of the ways, sometimes it's not an improved impact. Sometimes you go the other way, but that's also important to know as an organization. You want to be able to say, well, I'm going to stand behind what we do as an organization. I want to know that I'm doing good, and here is the evidence to back it up, while also needing to keep the lights on, maintain the funding for the next year. So where the two marry up nicely is that you get that ability to, know that you're doing the work that you want to do, you're doing good, and then you can use that to go off and secure further funding and get that ongoing, I guess, security that your programs can carry on. And that's, I think, when we talk to our customers, that's one of the big things, right? It's the fear of, I don't know where I'm going to get my next year's budget from. It's always kind of this cap in hand. I have to do another grants application. But when you can provide that evidence and you can provide it longitudinally, you're more likely to attract funding rather than be always going out and requesting it. So I've spoken a bit about the landscape and why there's a shift towards outcomes measurement, but I guess it's easy to say. And what we also notice is that within an organization, there might be a few individuals. So, people get it, right? They get the importance of this and why you have to do it, but that's easy to say, and it's less easy to get across within your organization. So, you might have lots of stakeholders, all with different opinions on funding and how you get, on secure funding. So there's a real kind of, I guess, awareness and alignment piece that needs to happen around outcomes measurement. And I guess the way we see it is that, outcomes measurement has to be a priority because funding is a priority. So as the landscape's shifting more to be outcomes focused, if you're not also focused on outcomes measurement, you are then, you're not probably going to be able to secure that ongoing funding. So a couple of ways that we can help. So we can come and speak at your organization. So we do a lot of presentations to lots of stakeholders, including C-level or management teams, to try and explain, I guess, the landscape around funding, the importance of it. So we can help you. We can come in and go, yeah, this is why people are doing it. The other area that is useful to start getting involved in is around groups such as SIMNA or Pro Bono Australia. So these provide lots of resources, not only from a funding landscape perspective, but also from a community of people trying to do something that's quite difficult, right? So again, it's easy to put on paper, we're going to do outcomes measurement, but the practicality of going out there and collecting information from hundreds, thousands of people is complicated. And, these are, I guess, communities that you can lean on to get, best practice and advice. And the other thing is that, again, we produce resources to try and help get that awareness. So we've got a white paper that we will share with you all after the webinar, which can actually, really give those clear, concise reasons why outcomes measurement is something that people need to be aware of and start thinking about from a reporting and funding perspective. And it's great to see, as part of the poll, 50% of you have said you're looking at already doing outcomes measurement. But what I'll challenge on is it outcomes or is it outputs? and is there that awareness within the sector to distill to? So what I wanted to do now is just talk about some of the different ways that our customers go out and gain funding or fund outcomes measurement. So we've worked with YMCA for a number of years, and obviously they've gone through so many different changes, and one thing that was really apparent, and I think something that a lot of people faced through COVID, was we deliver services face-to-face. We can't do that anymore. What do we do? And I think it was a challenge that they faced, specifically having to shift from face-to-face to online service delivery. And one thing that was really focused is, because they're able to always commit 10% of their funding to outcomes measurement, they always had that evidence that, okay, what we're doing is something that is working and it's having a significant change. So by using that information they collected across the programs and shifting across to the virtual Y, they were able to secure an additional 1.6 million in funding, because they're able to provide it. It wasn't anecdotal. It wasn't the number of people that clicked on it. It was the change that they were having by being involved in that program and service. So the next way is around, and this is just an idea. There's other grants and funding that's available that doesn't necessarily align directly to your activity or your program. So an example is one of our other customers who applied for a digital transformation grant. And basically what that was to help not-for-profits, automate or streamline the work they do. So Top Blokes was able to use that grant to expand the use of Socialsuite, to streamline that outcomes measurement, to then further demonstrate the good that they do across pretty much the whole of the east of Australia. So, again, there's indirect ways that you can look at obtaining the funding. And, I think there's a good statement there from Natalie just around how many hours that she's able to save by using technology in that process. And we spoke before about it being onerous, and I think that's something that is shifting now to be less onerous and more something that can be automated. The last one that I'd like to share is just around one of our customers, and they've gone down the road of the typical grant application, but I think what they really focus on when they're doing those grant applications is prioritizing outcomes measurement in that piece of work. So we are going to be doing this activity, we're going to evidence it in this way, we're using this piece of technology, and we're going to be able to provide you with this report at the end of it. And I'd just like to play a bit of a video that kind of sums up really nicely about, I guess that sentiment. So let's see if this works.
Don't wait anymore. Seriously. Because the more you wait, the more you're pushing, reality back. And the thing like you mentioned earlier, Matt, is mostly everyone is on it now. If you're not on it, you'll be the odd one. And the truth is, the quicker you jump on it, you'll be able to see, like we were just talking about, you'll be able to see different angles of your, you'll have to actually dig into your own organization. You have to literally see what everyone is doing, and it's a good opportunity to actually maybe clean up the organization from a policy and procedure point of view. It's a thing of the now. Like if you're going to funders will know that there are impact measurement is norm. So if you're going to a funder and if you don't have that, you will look like a fool. They will be like, no, maybe you will start considering that. Then you come back to us. But whereas us now, we are a fairly new foundation. We've got a different story to tell. We've got the story to say that, we recognize this from the start, and we've done it then.
Yeah, and that was Kenny from Kalara, and I think that's the piece around it. They recognised the requirement from the start, and everything they did was focused on, this is how we're going to evidence what we do as an organisation. So I guess that's it from me, and we'll take questions at the end, but feel free to put any questions in the chat and we can come back to them towards the end of the webinar. So thank you, and I'll pass you back on to Tom.
Thanks, Gareth. I think a few people in the chat were saying that that video is a bit echoey. But what we'll do is we'll send a follow-up email after the webinar, and we'll include that video clip in there as well, so everybody can sort of re-catch up on that clip. But what I'd like to do now is just go through a few different dashboard examples, and therefore we can just start to demonstrate as to how other organizations are utilizing real-time reporting to be able to provide that back to funders. The first one I want to show is actually a real customer that works with Socialsuite, and it's called Scope Australia. So for those that don't know, it's one of the largest disability providers in Australia, and again, based in Melbourne. And essentially they went through a process over a number of years to develop their outcomes framework, which is called MESA. And essentially they've developed a framework which covers across 9 different life domains, which you can see here is the different colors at the top. So you've got cultural life, economic life, educational life, and that really ties into the mission that they're trying to drive towards and change on individuals' lives. And what they've done essentially is develop a question that ties back to each of those high-level domains. And the rating scale is just a Likert scale from 1 to 5. So what they're able to do, okay, we can measure this across one or multiple programs that we run. And you can see all the different programs that Scope utilize this to measure across. So then what you can see from a very, very high level perspective, from a rating scale of -2 to +2, how are they going across all their beneficiaries, all of their programs in line with those different life domains? So very, very high level. But then what you're able to do within Socialsuite is start to disaggregate that data back down. So this particular view, they report to the board, and they report that on a 3-monthly basis. So they're able to set that 3-monthly period, provide that to the board, and they can see whether, how they're performing across all those different life domains. From a funding perspective, they have a couple of large philanthropic funds, and they deploy capital to specific individual programs, and they have to report back to them on a 6-monthly basis. So what they can easily do is go, okay, we can click that particular program. Again, we can set that particular time-bound period. We can extract that dashboard and provide that to the funders. Because they have the rigor of the process in place and streamlined to collect and aggregate that data, it means that it's just click of a button type stuff in order to be able to provide those reports back to the funders. Many of the organizations on this webinar that certainly indicate that measuring outcomes, you can probably identify with having to scramble a lot of Excel spreadsheets together or mashing different reports in order to provide that to the board or to provide to funders. So we just want to be able to provide that rigor. So it's just easy, simple, and click of a button to organizations as well. But then what you can see at the top as well is that Scope want to be able to look at this internally and say, okay, well, what demographics of individuals are we actually having impact across? And how can we take those learnings and revise what we offer to help drive impact to the other different demographics as well? So they can look at this from gender, they can look at it from, show me people with an acquired brain injury in comparison to people with an intellectual disability, and they can start to disaggregate and slice and dice that data as well, which provides them really good insights. So that's one example. We've got a few other sort of, demo dashboard environments, and all these dashboards are completely customizable as well. So if any organization in this webinar is thinking, well, that's not particularly what we're going to need to measure, we want to look at it via these different demographics, just pop in the chat and we can always reach out after this, and more than happy to have a conversation to understand, what you wanted to be able to visualize, or we can assist you through that process as well. This example is a mentoring program. It's essentially looking at females' confidence in applying for leadership roles. And what's interesting about this dashboard is that we can look at the data from the beneficiary's perspective, but we can also then look at the data from another reviewer, or in this case, the mentor's perspective. And in other organizations, that could be capturing a parent's perspective, getting a caseworker's perspective, and starting to look at this data holistically. So again, from a very, very high level, we could capture data from baseline, a 3, a 6, and 9-month period. We can see that 17% of mentees felt confident pre-program and 75% felt confident post-program. And then we can actually look at, okay, what did the mentors think about the mentees' confidence, again, pre and post, and how does that data correlate from that perspective as well? And as you can see here, we can drill down to a cohort level. We can even drill down to an individual beneficiary level as well. So that's one example. The next is starting to look at this data via different ways. So one way could be from a geographical perspective. So we work with a lot of organizations. We've done a lot of work with councils in particular, and they really wanted to look at the impact data from an LGA-based perspective. So, one of the outcomes that are being measured here is looking at people who've experienced prejudice against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders across a 3-month period. Again, very, very high level. We can see 25% or effectively 1 in 4 are experiencing that. We can look how that changes from year to year. But then what we've also done is captured, as I said, location. So, let's have a look how this compares within Victoria. And one of the demographics as well was capturing, what line of work or what sector they work within. So, within Victoria, we then want to cross-section that with how it compares in the education sector to that of the healthcare sector within Victoria. Again, applying one on multiple different filters that you want to be able to slice and dice that data by, and it's just click of a button style stuff just to be able to extract this as a report as well. The final one, going back to Ashley, you mentioned that one of the programs you're coming up is using the PWI, so the Personal Wellbeing Index, which obviously has those 7 high-level domains. So in this case, on a youth-based program across different high schools, we can see, what has been the positive increase from pre to post in line with those 7 different life domains. But then it also provides an overall average well-being of the beneficiaries that have gone through that program as well. So another thing that you can do within Socialsuite is able to actually bring in an external data set. So you can start to benchmark this data and make it a bit more meaningful. So in this instance, we've embedded an external data set called the Happy Planet Index. If we click on Australia, it provides things like happy life years. So apparently everyone in Australia is going to live 53.1 and we're going to live to 82 is pretty good. But the average well-being of people living within that particular area is 7.2, and then we can start to benchmark that against the data we've collected through Socialsuite in line with our outcomes framework. So hopefully that gives people a bit of a sense, on reporting and how you can get to that real-time dashboard perspective. Obviously, this is a bit of a journey in order to get there, and as Gareth said, this can be quite onerous on organizations, and a bit of a journey that we see organizations go on is outlined within this slide. So you can see when organizations are, at the start, we know we need to measure impact. They're attending a lot of seminars, conferences to actually understand, where do I start? How do I begin? And then going through generally external consultancy firms, developing your theory of change, working that back to program logics, how are you going to collect that data, then finding tools and systems to retrofit that framework that's been developed. That can be a long process, and that can be 2+ years. We've seen it even longer for certain organizations, and certainly the costs can rack up to 150,000 plus. So really what we've done at Socialsuite is sort of take both sides of the spectrum and bring them together. So what we do when we work with clients is really to provide them with an impact coach to guide them through the process, but also piecing that together with a system at the same time. So then you've got that turnkey solution to help you go out there and secure funding. As I said, it's quite disjointed when you have a third party developing the framework, you've got your internal team, and then you have a third party technology provider, and they're all not necessarily speaking to each other. It's quite hard to retrofit that process. So, going into that in a bit more of a granular fashion, this is how we would generally work with clients when they first come on board with Socialsuite. And first of all, because we can work with organizations wherever you're at on that impact journey, it's first of all having that initial assessment to understand where are you at? Like, do you have a high level theory of change? Are you completely new to impact measurement? You need to do it. You've got the drive internally. You just need to start from the very beginning. Then we can take you through that process of helping you develop that high level theory of change, working that back to what are the outcomes that tie back to your mission and vision, what are the indicators, and then looking at the more holistic picture of what is the strategy around that collection? So that's, things like who we collecting data from, what are the points in time do we need to collect this data in order to demonstrate that change over time? Within certain environments, like what would be the best method of collection? Is it face-to-face, send it by email, SMS, QR codes? So we help not just with the development of the framework and the technology side, but it's about ingraining the process within the organization as well. And then we go through things like survey design. So that could be looking at different rating scales that you could use for your questions, because all that again affects the reporting and how that can be represented as well. But whilst we're going through these stages, we're drip feeding the technology as you start to develop each of those stages as well. And then towards the end, we run a bit of a workshop around reporting. So, what are you trying to understand internally? Do you have any reporting requirements that need to be met? What sort of different demographics, and how can we visualize that data? And then we go ahead and start to construct that dashboard for you. And then with impact measurement, because it is an evolving process, it's not a static process, it's important that you have resources. And again, we provide physical resources, but also videos and other content to ensure that the health of your data collection is strong, the reporting requirements are still being met, there's still buy-in across the organization when there's staff changes as to the importance of measuring impact as well. So again, this can look different for different organizations. I might just quickly just pop my Calendly link in the chat. If anyone's sort of interested in understanding how it could work for their organization, then feel free just to book in a time straight into my calendar on the right hand side that sort of works for you. But yeah, that's sort of what we all got to go through today. I'd love to open it up to any questions that anybody might have, either for myself or for Gareth. Feel free just to pop those in the chat box as well. While people are thinking about the questions, is the one that's come through. Okay, so Lani has indicated price point. That's a good question. So in regards to Socialsuite, it's essentially an annual subscription. It is variable on different licenses depending on how many users you have as well. But it's 9,500 AUD per annum, and that's a recurring fee. And that includes all of the onboarding and development of the framework and everything we just went through there as well. Yeah, good question, Lani. While people are thinking of other questions, I might just quickly share another poll as well. I know this webinar has been focused on funding because I think our experience that it's not the only reason why people measure impact, but it's one of the main drivers as to why people actually go ahead and start to measure it. So I've just shared another poll on the right hand side, and yeah, just seeing what is the primary driver as to why organizations are wanting to measure outcomes. Is it to improve your programs and services? Is it to help secure funding, which we've focused on? Or is it more to share the progress with the beneficiaries so they can understand the change that your programs are having on them as well? So as the answers just start to flow in, I might just take Cheryl Ann's question. So Socialsuite is on the Salesforce platform. What is the added setup cost associated with implementing this CRM? Good question, Cheryl Ann, and sort of eagle eye noting that it is built on Salesforce. We can work in a couple of different ways. So first of all, if an organization already is using Salesforce, then we can just embed Socialsuite straight into that environment. And it means the contact record that you already have within Salesforce is the shared object between the two platforms to collect that longitudinal data against. In regards to implementing, Socialsuite is a product. So if you've implemented Salesforce and worked with SIs, it's a long custom process. That's not the case with Socialsuite. It's a product we can install separate, as its own instance or into your Salesforce instance within the matter of hours. So yeah. Joe, have an Australian social housing provider utilized the program as of yet? Yes, we've got multiple housing providers. CHL, Compass Housing, St. George Community Housing are currently using Socialsuite. I know there's discussions within that sector about having some form of commonality, potentially around the PWI metrics as well. So we're in discussions with CHEA, New South Wales, around that as well. Unless there's any others, Gareth, that I've missed.
I think that's, all at the moment.
Yeah, perfect. Lani's asking, do you have any discounts in collaboration with Connecting Up? Very good question. We're actually attending the Connecting Up conference next month in Melbourne, so hopefully see you there. Generally, there is an implementation fee with Socialsuite, but for all organizations, either with Connecting Up or attending this webinar, we're more than happy to sort of waive the implementation fee. But it's probably worth just having a conversation, Lani, understand your license requirements and see if there's anything we can do from that perspective. Ashley, more and more funders are embedding outcomes measurement KPIs in contracts. How does Socialsuite work with their clients' case management systems that may be integrated with funder reporting platforms? Therefore, how to augment reporting? Very good question. I think, Gareth, you're probably the one to answer that.
Yeah, I think when you're kind of using a bigger piece around case management or other things, there is some, I guess, crossover required. So typically, when we deploy Socialsuite, it's Socialsuite. It does impact measurement. So for that sort of thing, you're looking at getting someone to integrate those two things together to do your kind of joint reporting, which of course is all possible in Salesforce, but typically more an SI than what we do. When I say SI, that would be a service implementer, like a partner to do that technical component.
Hopefully that clarifies that, Ashley. Lani, is there a lock-in contract for a certain time, i.e. commitment of years? The other commitment is 12 months, and it's just a rolling 12-month commitment. When you look at an outcomes-based impact measurement landscape, in order for you to get longitudinal data and data in real-time dashboards, realistically that 12-month period is the shortest amount of time, and a lot of organizations treat that as a bit of a pilot phase as well. And pick one particular program, start to measure across, take the learnings, and then start to scale that across other programs that they do as well. Okay, I don't think there's any other questions, but again, thank you for everyone for taking the time out. As I said, it's probably, one last like, how would social impact of technology like social robots? How would social impact be measured? You might just need to clarify that one, sorry, Rajiv. A bit confused on that one. Unless you can. Yeah, it's a good question. Actually, I've not heard of a social robot. Just while Rajiv's rephrasing the question, we'll just go back onto the next one. So Gabrielle from Nigeria, welcome from Nigeria. Not too sure what time it would be there, but no doubt it's probably very early. You've got 3 different projects and you'd like to see how Socialsuite can help with impact. Perfect, we'll reach out after this call, Gabrielle, and we'll sort of go into more depth in terms of your requirements and sort of demonstrate hopefully some similar use cases to your organizations as well. Okay, round 2, Rajiv, how do you measure social impact of social robots deployments in home-based care disability services?
I think I could answer this. I think you wouldn't measure the impact of the robot, you'd measure the impact of the people that it's serving, right? So has doing that intervention changed, the beneficiary of that initiative for the better? So you're still measuring the beneficiaries, not, I guess, impact of the services deployed by the robots. Yeah, so what impact has that intervention had on the people it's serving?
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And then you could look at the dashboarding from that perspective, Rajiv, of if you're identifying which programs are delivered by robots and which are delivered by sort of human intervention. And then you could also look at that higher level and look at the impact from those programs by robots to people with human intervention and start to see if there's differences from that perspective as well.
Yeah, very interesting question. I haven't heard of social robots before. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, more than happy to pick up the conversation as well, Rajiv. But yeah, I think that's no more questions. We'll sort of wrap up. Again, thank you everyone for taking the time. I hope everyone has a fantastic Easter break and some well-earned time off. And yeah, we'll reach out to the people that have indicated, and yeah, look forward to connecting post-webinar. Thanks everyone. See you later.
Bye.